When her 15-year-old marriage came to a devastating end, Rosie Green found herself in the depths of despair.
Well, despite trying everything to make herself feel better, it was only when Rosie started taking antidepressants that she found herself able to sleep, eat and function normally again.
With more than 8 million people in the UK taking this kind of medication, Rosie is joining us now alongside Dr Nighat to share her experience. And it's lovely to have you here. Thank you for talking about this. So before your marriage ended, you say you saw yourself as an optimistic person.
Yeah, definitely glass half full. I'd say three-quarters full. You know, so I've always been, lucky to have that optimistic, happy, bubbly nature. I think anybody that knows me would say that about me.
And then 2018, you discovered some text messages that would turn your life upside down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I'd been in this very long, happy marriage, and that was just a totally sort of devastating, destabilising blow. But I think what was interesting is that I'd had very hard things before, like we all have, but it was this particular blow that sent me into a sort of mental spiral.
And there were consequences both mentally and physically as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I lost 2 stone in as many months. I mean, it was dramatic. And then I felt almost animalistic. I was sort of shaking. I felt even my sort of sweat smelled different. I felt, I felt sort of always very anxious and on sort of high alert.
So you went to your GP, very sensible, and this was when it was first suggested that maybe you could try an antidepressant. How did you feel about that initially? Like, what was your preconceived ideas going into that?
I didn't, I think really I just thought, I didn't have any judgment on people that took them, and I knew they existed and I knew lots of friends took them, but I just didn't ever think that I would probably need them because I felt like I didn't have that nature, or I'd been lucky enough to be born with a chemical makeup that would mean I didn't mean it. So I was a bit anxious about taking them, and really I went to the doctors, I wanted sleeping pills. So she actually said, I think long-term sleeping pills are a bad idea. And she said, I just think this will give you clarity over the situation and stop the overwhelm and the anxious thoughts.
Because you did fall into the stigma a wee bit of the way people think they are going to be viewed if I'm taking antidepressants. Even the pharmacist, you thought that as you got your prescription, you thought you were going to be judged.
Oh, yeah, I thought, what's she going to think of me? And actually, I think in the moment that the GP gave to me, I was in such a bad space that I didn't sort of worry about others' viewpoint. But it was only later. I worried about the pharmacist. I worried when if I was to write about it, that work people, I'm in the media, would think that, I wouldn't be able to deliver on deadlines, or I was kind of falling apart. And then when I started dating again, I worried that the guys that I was seeing might think that I was sort of, again, a liability in some way.
So, the reality, though, once you started taking them, how quickly did you notice a change?
Well, in the first week, I noticed a sort of negative change, as it were, because I felt quite sort of dizzy. I think it's hard to remember exactly, but I think I felt a bit dizzy. I sort of had sort of slight brain zaps, a bit of nausea, nothing really bad, but I just sort of, I could feel something was happening in my body. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I felt the famous click that people talk about, which is just that I just could manage to get a sort of perspective on the situation. I just felt calmer, and I didn't have that sort of fight or flight feeling all the time. And I could then started to be able to sleep, which was, again, then started an upward cycle, I think.
They don't fix everything.
No.
And it's good that they helped you sleep.
Yeah.
And once they'd kicked in, there are, people say, oh, they made me feel a bit muddy, and I felt a little bit sort of out of it. Did they have any of those effects at all, or was everything positive for you?
No, I did. That sort of blunting effect that you're talking about, I definitely. Oh, so yeah, the muddiness I didn't really feel. They were mainly positive. In fact, 98% positive. I think if I had any sort of feedback, it would be that when I've sort of come out of the other side, my daughter's like, when I sing beautifully, I'd like you to cry. So I feel that, I sort of had an extra layer of Teflon coating, so I wasn't feeling things as deeply. And as a writer, I was a bit worried about that. So I was thinking a lot of what I write is quite emotional and empathetic. And so I was worried that I wouldn't be able to feel as deeply. And I definitely feel it did help me in that way. Like, the things that were thrown at me, I could brush off more easily.
So the time came when you think, I don't know if I need these anymore. I think I might explore what it's like not to take them. And this is not an easy process. This is definitely not a process you should do on your own. You should definitely speak to your doctor about it. But during lockdown, when life stood still, you thought, right, I'm going to see how this works. And it wasn't easy, was it?
It wasn't easy. And I think, I mean, you'll be able to explain this much better than me, but I think I didn't really realise that actually you will sink a bit lower than your natural resting. So I thought if I stopped taking them, I would just return to me and then, I'll see how I'm doing underneath without the help. But actually, I think the way it works slightly is that you kind of go to a point below that. So I actually suddenly, I think I didn't wean myself off them in the correct way. And then I suddenly went to a point where I was like back almost to being that kind of really vulnerable, really anxious, really emotional person. And I thought, my God, is this me? Have I not done any healing in the past 2 years? And then I also thought, well, that's it. I'm gonna need to be on them forever. Which, FYI, wouldn't be such a terrible thing. It's not like I suffered many side effects, you know, or even, you know, hardly any. But it made me a bit anxious because I thought...
someone else came into your life.
Yeah.
So life is nicely positive.
Yeah.
You decided to give it another go, and you weaned yourself gradually off. Was this in consultation with your GP?
Yes, and actually the first time was, but I think I probably hadn't followed her advice to the letter. And the second time was also, and I think, you know, it was a mixture of, yes, lovely new man in my life, plus, you know, we sorted out the divorce, the house was stable, all these things. So I think probably in 2020, when I'd gone off, it was a combination of actually not, those things weren't quite sorted. I was in a relationship that was much more kind of, you know, light, you know, it didn't have the same depth and stability. And I think now I was in a much better place insecurity-wise, but also instead of taking them every other day, which is what I'd done before, I was taking half every day, and I did that for a much longer period of time.
And so when it comes to sort of anybody, you know, thinking, oh, maybe this is something that I could benefit from, how do they exactly work and when are they a good thing to do?
Oh, that's a $1 million question right there. How do antidepressants work? Actually, the truth is we don't know. We think they help regulate the dysfunction of the serotonin. And serotonin is what can lead to, if you have a low in that can lead to clinical symptoms of depression. Yeah. We also think that the way they work is that they are able to allow you to engage in cognitive behavioural therapy. So in no way is sort of antidepressants just the sole treatment that we try as GPs. There has to be a holistic approach. And I say to a lot of my patients, this is part of the toolkit to help you make you feel better. And it's allowing you to engage with cognitive behavioural therapy, sort out the situational problems, because we have all sorts of things that come our way. 100% of people will suffer with their mental well-being at some point in their life. And antidepressants is just one of the things that we use to help you with that.
Well, I mean, in line to what you just said, I mean, the NHS say it is not clearly known how they work. Yeah. So, OK, we have them as a tool. I mean, imagine how incredible they'd be if we figured out how they worked. So how long can you expect, bearing in mind that there should be no stigma here, and this is just another tool in your armoury to get through life. How long before they can kick in? And what can be the side effects? It varies
from person to person. The first thing about stigma, I'm so pleased that somebody of Rosie's profile is bringing this to the forefront to say it can happen to anyone. You know, it's no matter about your background or whatever, it can happen to anybody. In regards to how quickly they work, it varies from person to person, not one size fits all. For some of my patients, when I start them, so SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are the most common ones. So that could be your sertraline or your citalopram. And then they can take roughly for about a week to 2 weeks. And you do get that rocky period right at the start. Firstly, I find that comes from the patient thinking, oh, now I have to take something. There's a realisation that this is real. Yes. I think there's a real issue at the start where they feel that this isn't something that's real. And then there's an issue that we have, particularly amongst Black and Asian communities, where we have the least amount of uptake in antidepressants because compliance is so low. Because there is still that stigma, I'm going to be mad. In Punjabi, we say pagal. Pagal is craziness. And we still do associate that with mental well-being, which is awful. And so in order to allow the medication to work, it's very individualistic. There's loads of other things that have to be taken into mind. Diet, exercise. For women, I always say your hormones as well will play a role. Whereabouts in your periods are you? Are you perimenopausal? But we know from lots and lots of data and trials that actually by 4 to 6 weeks, most people find that the benefits way outweigh the risks and the side effects.
And just finally, because everybody's experience is quite different, but coming off them, definitely not to be done on your own, go back to your GP?
Yeah, there was a study that was done back in 2017 that showed there is half of people go on it and get emotional blunting, which is the biggest reason why they try and come off it, because they don't feel the emotions that they used to do. So do that in conjunction with your healthcare provider. And going cold turkey, lots of studies have shown, please don't do that. You need to have a gradual, tapered amount. And don't compare, my friends came off it in 2 weeks. No. With every single individual patient that I see in my NHS practice, I say to them, you are very different from your friends. And it could be that I take 6 months, 9 months to gradually wean you off the dose that you're on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh,
very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.